Real English for your daily life.
Master English together.
Quick question. How many goals felt exciting on Monday and weirdly heavy by Friday?
If your notebook is still shiny but your habits are already sleeping, you're not alone.
This is a B1 level episode, perfect for intermediate learners. Beginners, you're welcome too. And honestly, this topic hurts because it feels so familiar. You start with energy, then life gets loud, and somehow your plan disappears behind laundry, messages, and one more scroll.
And today we're digging into why that happens, and why try harder usually isn't the answer. There is a cleaner way to think about goals, especially if you're busy and your brain keeps choosing the old route.
We've all done the dramatic Monday version of ourselves, right? New alarm, new notebook, new self-control. Then by Thursday, you're negotiating with a sofa like it's your manager.
Oh, I've absolutely made that deal. My brain has a talent for turning "I'll read for 10 minutes" into "maybe tomorrow," after I become a different person.
And that's the key. The problem isn't just motivation. A lot of goals fail because they feel like chores, not like part of who you are. When a goal feels like a task, your brain treats it like optional homework.
Exactly, but when a goal starts to match your identity, something changes. That shift is powerful. And a little sneaky, because it doesn't feel heroic at first. It feels small, normal, almost boring.
We're going to unpack that idea with self-determination theory too, because autonomy matters. People stick with things longer when the action feels chosen, not forced.
And that connects to identity shift. When you stop asking, "How do I finish this goal?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" The second question changes the whole game.
Quick choice A or B. A, I need more discipline. B, I need a better system.
If you picked B, nice. Systems are kinder to tired humans. And later, we'll give you one tiny trick that makes a goal easier to restart after a bad day. But first, stay with us, because there is one reason your plan keeps sliding back into the same old pattern.
And if you're listening while commuting, washing dishes, or pretending to answer email, I see you.
We probably just caught you mid-scroll, and that's okay.
Let me tell you about Lena, a remote worker I know. Monday morning, she promised herself she'd finally fix her English routine, start exercising, and stop living inside her phone.
And by Tuesday night, her laptop was open, her goals were open, and her attention was gone. That's painfully normal.
She didn't fail because she was lazy. She failed because the plan was built like a wish list, not a life.
Exactly. Her goal was study English for an hour a day. That sounds noble, but it doesn't tell the brain who she is or when this happens. So every day she had to debate from zero.
And that debate is exhausting. Because the brain doesn't just want effort, it wants certainty. If every choice feels new, it starts bargaining. Later, after dinner, after messages, after I recover from being alive.
After I recover from being alive is depressingly accurate. My brain uses that excuse with surprising confidence.
This is where identity shift starts to matter. An identity shift is a change in how you see yourself and what you do. It's not a magic speech to the mirror. It's a tiny internal vote that says, this is part of me now.
Right. And self-determination theory helps explain why that works. When people feel autonomy, competence, and connection, they're more likely to keep going. So if your goal feels forced, fragile, or lonely, your brain resists it.
So instead of, I must read because I should, the better question is, what kind of person keeps a reading habit even on a busy day? That question feels different in your chest. Less like punishment, more like direction.
Lena's first shift was simple. She stopped saying, "I need to be disciplined," and started saying, "I'm someone who protects 10 minutes for learning." Then she linked it to a cue. After lunch, she put her headphones on and opened a podcast.
That's crucial. Without a cue, good intentions drift. A cue is a signal that reminds you to do something. It's like your brain's little sticky note, except it actually survives the day.
A sticky note that doesn't disappear under a pile of tabs. Respect.
The first week, she didn't do much. 10 minutes, sometimes 7, sometimes 5.5, which is still absurdly better than 0.
And that tiny action gave her evidence. Not a fantasy version of herself. Actual proof. She was building momentum, which means it starts to feel easier and faster because the habit stops asking for a full debate.
That word matters. Build momentum isn't just energy. It's the feeling that the next step is less awkward than the last one. Once the action feels familiar, your brain stops treating it like a surprise attack.
I once tried to become a morning runner overnight. I bought the shoes, I planned the route, I even looked heroic in my own head. For about 2 days, then the alarm rang and I negotiated with myself like a lawyer in sweatpants.
That's so real. And the issue wasn't the shoes. It was that the identity arrived before the behavior. You wanted the title before the evidence.
Exactly. Identity shift works the other way around. You do the tiny action, then the brain says, "Oh, maybe that's who we are." It's quiet, but it's sticky.
And the scary part is that many of us already know what we want. The real problem is the emotional cost of restarting every single day. If the habit has no cue, no identity link, and no easy beginning, your mind starts seeing it as extra work.
Which is why busy people don't need a perfect schedule first. They need a repeatable bridge between intention and action. That's the practical side of this.
So picture your day. You wake up, rush, check messages, answer something urgent, then suddenly it's evening and the important thing never happened. The goal wasn't impossible, it was invisible.
Let's make that concrete. Suppose your goal is English. If you say, "I'll study whenever I have time," your brain hears, "probably never." But if you say, "After lunch, I listen for 10 minutes," now the habit has a home.
And if lunch changes, you still don't lose the whole plan, you just find a nearby cue. Maybe your coffee mug, maybe the first email you send after break. The point is not perfection, it's a reliable trigger.
That's how people stick with something. Not by being endlessly inspired, but by making the next step obvious enough to choose without a long argument.
There's another layer too. When a goal only asks for willpower, it drains you. But when the identity is clearer, the choice gets simpler. You don't wake up asking, "Do I feel like the kind of person who learns today?" You just start.
Which is much less dramatic than our inner monologues prefer. My inner monologue wants music, applause, and a personal trainer. Reality mostly wants a chair and a timer.
Lena didn't suddenly become a different person. She just collected small proof. One podcast after lunch, then another, then a few notes. That repeated evidence changed the story she told herself.
And once the story changed, she was more likely to follow through. Follow through means finishing what you started, even when the first wave of excitement is gone. That's the moment goals usually fall apart.
Right, and this is why week 1 matters so much. The first week is where your identity either stays abstract or starts becoming real.
Let's pause on the psychology for a second. There is a common mistake here. People think they need stronger pressure. More guilt, more rules, more no excuses.
But guilt doesn't create a stable identity. It creates temporary panic. And panic is a terrible long-term coach.
Exactly. Self-determination theory says people do better when the motivation feels internal. So if the habit matches who you want to be, you don't need to force the engine as hard.
And that is why the identity version sounds so much better in real life. I'm a person who reads after lunch. I'm a person who protects my health. I'm a person who keeps promises to myself. Those sentences are small, but they change how you move.
They also make failure less dramatic. If you miss one day, you're not a failure. You're just a person who needs a better cue or a smaller step. That reduces shame, and shame is usually the thing that makes people quit.
So here's the practical test for today. If your goal feels heavy, ask whether it sounds like a task or an identity. If it sounds like a task, your brain will keep treating it as optional.
And if it sounds like identity, you have a better shot at repetition. Because now the habit isn't visiting your life, it's moving in.
That line was annoyingly good. I hate how good it was.
I'll take that as a compliment. And by the way, there's a phrase for this whole pattern. It connects identity, repetition, and the little signals that keep you going.
Stay with us because in a minute, we're going to make those 5 ideas crystal clear. And then we'll show you how to use them in your own day without turning your life into a productivity spreadsheet. Okay, so here's the part that matters most. You don't need a bigger personality, and you don't need to wake up as a new human by Monday. You need a lighter path into the identity you already want.
I don't know. That sounds nice, but isn't it just softer language for self-help? If someone wants to get fit, learn English, or stop doom scrolling, they still have to do the work.
They do, but the work lands differently when it starts with identity. Think about it. If you say, I'm the kind of person who cares for my body, a 10-minute walk isn't random, it's evidence.
But evidence doesn't pay the rent. People fail because they set goals that are too small. Then they feel proud and stop. Big goals create pressure, and pressure creates results.
That's missing the whole picture. Pressure can create a burst, sure, but it can also burn people out by Thursday. If the goal feels like punishment, your brain looks for the exit.
Hold on. Some pressure is good. Without it, people get comfortable. I've seen people say they're building a new identity, and really they're just hiding from real standards.
That can happen, but identity isn't an excuse to do less. It's a way to stop fighting yourself. Self-determination theory says people stay with habits longer when they feel autonomous, competent, and connected, not just watched or pushed.
Okay, that's fair, but I still think people use theory to avoid simple discipline. If you want to write every day, just write. If you want to exercise, just put on your shoes. Why make it philosophical?
Because philosophy changes behavior when the old story is the problem. Here's the difference. I should work out sounds like a command. I'm someone who moves my body sounds like a choice. One feels like debt, the other feels like ownership.
I get that. But what if someone says the identity line and still does nothing? Isn't that just a nice sentence in a notebook?
Great question. That's why the identity line alone isn't enough. You need one tiny action that proves it today. Not a heroic plan, just proof. If I say I'm someone who reads, then I open the book for 2 minutes. That tiny action gives the brain a receipt.
Okay, the receipt idea makes sense. But people still need consistency, and consistency is hard when life gets messy. A long shift, a sick kid, a delayed train, the plan collapses fast.
Exactly. And that's where the environment matters. You don't wait for perfect willpower. You place a cue where your future self can see it. A book on the pillow, shoes by the door, headphones next to lunch. The cue says this matters right now.
But a cue alone won't save anyone. I've got a pile of notes on my desk, and they just become decoration. My brain learns to ignore them after a while.
True, if the cue has no follow-up, that's why the cue needs a tiny reward right after the action. A check mark, a moment to breathe, a text to a friend. The brain loves patterns that end well.
So you're saying the reward isn't bribing yourself. It's teaching your brain that the new behavior is worth repeating.
Exactly. And that's how you build momentum. The first rep feels awkward, the second feels less dramatic, and by the third, you're not arguing with yourself as much. You're already moving.
But what if the first rep is still awful? What if someone tries for 3 days, misses 1 day, and then thinks the whole thing is ruined?
Then the goal was probably too fragile. The answer isn't shame. It's a smaller restart. A missed day doesn't erase the identity shift. It just means the system needs a better cue, a smaller action, or a quicker reward.
I still think people underestimate grit. Sometimes you do need to push through. If everything becomes gentle, won't people just stay comfortable forever?
Not if the system is honest. Gentle doesn't mean vague. It means repeatable. Stick with something long enough and your brain starts to recognize you as the kind of person who does it. That's not comfort. That's repetition becoming character.
Okay, but let's make this concrete. Someone says, I want to improve my English. What do they actually do on a Tuesday when they're tired and distracted?
They shrink the plan. I'm someone who practices English becomes, after lunch, I listen for 10 minutes. Not during a perfect study block, just after lunch. Then they put the podcast icon on the home screen. That's the cue.
And the reward?
1 minute of guilt-free scrolling, a coffee, or a quick note saying, done. The point isn't luxury. It's making the new loop feel complete. If they can repeat that enough times, they don't just do English, they become the person who keeps showing up.
I can see why that matters. The old way is, I'll be perfect next week. The new way is, I'll prove it today. That feels smaller, but maybe it's stronger.
Yes, and that's the debate. Big promises look impressive, but small proofs change identity. If the goal is to become someone different, the smallest honest action is worth more than the biggest fantasy.
Fine, I'm convinced enough to try it. But I still think the hardest part is not the first step. It's staying with it when the novelty wears off.
And that is exactly why this works. Because once the identity is clearer, the next step feels less like a debate. It feels like follow-through. So the shift isn't magic. It's identity, a cue, and one tiny action that proves who you're becoming.
And once that loop starts, you can stick with it long enough to build momentum, which is exactly what most plans never reach.
Right, and in a minute we'll unpack the 5 phrases we use today.
If you've been nodding along while washing dishes, this is your sign to keep going.
I keep thinking about that moment when we stopped chasing a perfect Monday and talked about who you want to be instead. That's the heart of today's first phrase.
You mean identity shift? A change in how you see yourself and what you do. It's not just a mood swing. It's when your actions start matching a new self-image.
Exactly. And in real life it sounds simple. If I say I'm someone who reads, then a book on my pillow isn't random decoration. It's evidence, right?
Right? And if I say I'm someone who moves, then my shoes by the door stop being background furniture. That's the difference between wishful thinking and an identity shift.
And the nice part is, the shift can be tiny at first. You don't need a dramatic reinvention. You just need one honest action that says, "This is me now."
That tiny action needs a helper, though. That's where Q comes in, a signal that reminds you to do something.
Like your phone alarm after lunch, or the podcast icon on your home screen, or shoes by the door. The cue doesn't do the work for you. It just nudges your brain at the right moment.
My desk lamp is basically a cue for snacks, so clearly the brain can learn anything. But for habits, the best cue is usually boring and visible.
Yes, visible matters. If the cue is hidden, your tired brain won't go looking for it. It'll choose the easiest old pattern. That's why a cue works best when you can see it without effort.
And once you see the cue, you want the action to be small enough that you can actually start. That's how you stick with something. To continue doing something over time, even when life gets messy.
I love that phrase because it sounds patient, not dramatic. You stick with a podcast, a routine, a language app, a walk after lunch. Not because every day feels inspiring, but because the pattern is steady.
And if you want to stick with something, you can't make the first step so big that your brain rebels. Read one page is easier to stick with than read for an hour.
My brain definitely respects the one-page version. It doesn't throw a meeting or ask for a motivational speech. It just says, "Fine, one page."
That's the secret power of small wins. They help you build momentum.
Build momentum means something starts getting easier and faster. The first time feels clumsy. The next time feels less annoying. And soon the action doesn't need so much arguing.
Like rolling a heavy suitcase, terrible at the start. Then suddenly it starts moving and you think, okay, we can do this. That's build momentum in everyday life.
And momentum is emotional too. When you see proof that you're showing up, you feel less like a failure and more like a person with a working routine.
Which leads to the last phrase, follow through. To follow through means to finish what you started.
That one matters so much because lots of people start with fireworks and end with leftovers. They buy the notebook, download the app, announce the plan, and then vanish.
Guilty. I've had plans that looked amazing for 48 hours and then became future Noah's problem. That's not follow through. That's creative avoidance.
Exactly. And the fix isn't shame. It's making the ending easier to reach. If your goal is to follow through, you need a finish line that's visible, simple, and not overloaded.
So if I want to follow through on English practice, I don't need a giant study marathon. I need a small promise I can actually keep after lunch.
Yes, and then the routine becomes evidence again. Identity shift, cue, stick with, build momentum, follow through. They're not fancy words, they're a chain.
And that chain is what turns a wish into a habit. If one link is missing, the plan feels fragile. If the links connect, the whole thing starts to hold.
I love that. And the best part is, none of this asks you to become a superhero. Just a person with a clearer story and a smaller start.
Exactly. Use these phrases when you talk about your own goals, and you'll sound more natural and think more clearly too.
So here's what we covered today. Goals don't fail because you're lazy or undisciplined. They fail because they feel like tasks instead of part of who you are.
And the fix isn't a stricter schedule or a louder alarm. It's a quieter question. Who am I becoming? That identity shift changes how your brain treats the whole plan.
If you want to try this today, here's the simplest version. Take one goal you've been avoiding and rewrite it as an identity sentence. Not, "I want to exercise more, but I'm someone who moves my body." Then pick one tiny action that proves it before tonight.
And place a cue where your future self can actually see it. Book on the pillow. Shoes by the door. Podcast icon on the home screen. The cue does the remembering so you don't have to.
Honestly, the part that stayed with me most from today's conversation is the receipt idea. Every small action is proof. You're not waiting to feel ready. You're collecting evidence that you already are.
And I'll admit, I came in skeptical. I still think grit matters. But I can see now that identity and grit aren't opposites. Identity just gives grit somewhere to land.
That's the most poetic thing you've said all episode. I'm writing that down.
Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation.
Before you go, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments what's one goal you've been restarting every Monday, and what tiny cue could you place today to make it stick?
We read every single comment. Your answer might show up in a future episode.
Thanks for listening, and thanks for showing up today.
See you next time. Keep going. One small proof at a time.